My wife cheated on me with my business partner. I started to notice him wanting to see her more often than usual. She tried to hide the cheating, but when I found out I did. The evening seemed perfect, warm lighting in the restaurant, soft jazz music, and the aroma of steaks wafting from the kitchen. Jack Carter sat at a table in Blue Flame Grill with his wife, Emily, and his business partner, Nick Grayson. This dinner wasn't just a celebration of a successful deal but also a chance for Jack to unwind. Yet, something felt off. Jack noticed Emily laughing at Nick's jokes a bit louder than usual. Her gaze seemed slightly dazed, as if she saw no one but him. "That's just incredible, Nick," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I didn't even know you played saxophone in college." "Oh, yeah. Though I gave it up when I went into business. It's not like we have time for hobbies anymore, you know," Nick replied, throwing Emily a glance that Jack found uncomfortably long. "Right, we definitely don't," Jack added grimly, pretending to study the wine menu intently. He felt like a third wheel at the table, and it irked him. Later that night, back at home, Emily acted as if nothing had happened. "Did you notice how Nick went all out with that story about his college years? He's so funny," she said, taking off her shoes in the bedroom. "Yeah, great story," Jack muttered. Her carefree tone felt strangely unnatural. "You're hiding something," he thought, watching as Emily headed to the shower. The next day, Jack began noticing peculiarities. Nick started suggesting late-night work sessions, something entirely out of character for him. Emily, who usually preferred staying home, suddenly announced she'd signed up for yoga classes and wanted to spend more time on herself. At first, Jack tried to dismiss it. Maybe it's just a coincidence, he reassured himself. But doubts gnawed at him. On the third night, he saw Emily texting someone while sitting on the couch. When Jack entered the room, she quickly locked her phone screen. "Who's that?" he asked with feigned nonchalance. "Oh, just Laura from yoga. We're discussing a new class." But her eyes avoided his, and her voice was too quick. A week later, Jack noticed something else. Nick mistakenly sent him a message clearly not intended for him: "Tomorrow at 8 p.m., same hotel. You know where to find the key." Jack stared at the screen, a dull ache building in his chest. Jack didn't reply to the message. He simply watched his phone screen go dark, consumed by the silence of his home office. That message was proof that something was undeniably wrong. Same hotel? He thought, twisting an old pen in his hand, a gift from Nick commemorating the anniversary of their first big deal. He wanted to storm into the bedroom and demand an explanation from Emily, but something held him back. "No, I won't make a fool of myself without evidence." Instead, Jack decided to play the long game. The first thing he did was take a screenshot of the message. Then he called an old acquaintance, Joe Parker, a private investigator he had worked with on business matters. "Joe, I need your time, and I can't discuss this over the phone." "Let's meet tomorrow," Jack said, trying to sound calm. The next morning, they met at a cafe on the outskirts of town. "So, what's this about? Competitors? Theft?" Joe asked as the waitress brought their coffee. "Personal. I need eyes on two people, Emily and Nick Grayson. I want to know where they go, who they meet, everything you can find." Joe nodded, not asking unnecessary questions. "Okay, give me a week. I'll send you whatever I find." Over the week, Jack tried to act normal, but every action of Emily's now seemed suspicious. She spent more time out of the house, returning late with a smile on her face that clearly wasn't meant for him. Meanwhile, Joe sent brief updates. The first thing that caught Jack's attention was the frequent meetings between Nick and Emily at the same hotel in downtown Chicago. "They go in within minutes of each other," Joe said during a phone call. "Yesterday, she was there from 8 to 11 p.m. Also, here's another thing, Nick books these rooms under a fake name. Jack gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Are you sure? Absolutely. I've got video, photos, and receipts. Jack looked at the photos. There was no doubt, his wife, the woman he'd been married to for 10 years, was holding hands with his best friend and business partner. Jack didn't sleep that night, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a whirlwind of anger, disappointment, and pain. He reviewed the photos over and over, as if trying to pinpoint the moment he lost control. The next morning, Emily approached him in the kitchen as if nothing had happened. Jack, you've been so moody lately. What's wrong? Her voice sounded almost sincere, which infuriated him even more. Work, he replied curtly, not looking up from the newspaper. I hope you're not overworking yourself. We still have that weekend trip coming up, remember? She smiled, tugging at his shoulder. Jack nodded, pretending to listen. What an actress, he thought. Later that day, Jack received Joe's final report. Everything was crystal clear, they'd been seeing each other behind his back for months. Nick used business trips as a cover, and Emily pretended she was busy with fitness. Jack made his decision. I won't cause a scene. I'll catch them with no room for excuses. He called his lawyer and discussed a plan to redistribute shares in the company. Luckily, he held the majority stake, which meant he could oust Nick without violating their contract. The following day, Jack invited Nick and Emily to an important business future dinner at his home. I think we need a meeting to discuss how to strengthen our positions for the next quarter, he told Nick over the phone. Nick agreed without question. When the evening came, Jack set a lavish table. Steaks, salads, an expensive bottle of wine, everything looked perfect. Emily and Nick, unaware of the trap, sat down at the table. Well, here's to success, Jack proposed, raising his glass. Nick smiled. To success. At that moment, Jack took his phone out of his pocket and placed it on the table. Now, let's talk about what you two consider success. He pressed play, and a video began to play on the screen, Emily and Nick in the hotel lobby, then in the elevator, and finally leaving the same room. The room fell silent. Jack, this isn't what it looks like, Emily began, her voice trembling. Really? Then tell me what I'm thinking. Emily froze, staring at the phone screen. Her face turned as pale as chalk, and her lips quivered. Nick, on the other hand, though looking startled, tried to keep his composure. He glanced quickly at Jack, as if assessing his level of anger, and reached for his wine glass. Jack, he began calmly, let's talk about this like adults. This is all, not what it seems. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and grinned predatorily. Adults? Are you talking about us, or about you two sneaking into a hotel room last week? Or maybe about the adult lies I've been fed every time my wife said she was going to yoga? Enlighten me, Nick. It was a mistake, Emily blurted out, grabbing his hand. I don't know why I did it. Jack, it means nothing, I swear. Jack leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass. Nothing? Well, if that's true, then you two were just playing with me. Using me as the convenient idiot to foot your bills, your trips, and apparently, your damn hotel rooms. Nick shook his head. Look, I know how this looks. But my relationship with you has always been more important than anything, Jack. It was a stupid lapse in judgment. Let's resolve this peacefully. Jack shot him a cold glare. Peacefully. Peacefully. You screwed my wife, Nick. And now you want me to be peaceful. He slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses clink. Emily shrieked, recoiling, and Nick instinctively raised his hands as if to defend himself. Here's what we're going to do, Jack said, standing abruptly. You, Nick, are out of my business. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing paperwork to renegotiate our partnership deal. You have two options, sell your shares to me or let me destroy you in court. You can't do that, Nick snapped. We have a contract. You can't just cut me out. Jack smirked. Oh, I can. Because I have something you clearly underestimated. All those business trips paid for with the corporate card, all the hotel receipts. It's all with my lawyer. Nick paled, realizing he'd been cornered. You wouldn't do that, he whispered. Watch me, Jack replied. Emily tried to step between them, her eyes filled with tears. Jack, I made a mistake. But we can fix this. I'll fix everything. Please, give me a chance. He looked at her with cold disdain. Fix it? You slept with my best friend. You didn't just destroy our marriage, you destroyed my life. How do you fix that? What are you going to do, pack your things and rewind time? She lowered her head, sobbing. Nick sat silently at the table, avoiding Jack's gaze. Consider this your last dinner on my terms, Jack said, tossing his napkin onto the table. Because tomorrow morning, you'll both learn what it's like to be on the other side of my anger. He walked out of the room, leaving them in silence. The next morning, Jack arrived at his office earlier than usual. His lawyer, Lauren Bailey, was already waiting in the conference room. We have all the grounds for a lawsuit, she said, spreading out the documents. Your idea of using the corporate funds is a solid point of leverage. Nick won't want this going public. Perfect. I want him to understand I'll destroy his reputation if he resists. What about Emily? Lauren asked cautiously. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the anger well up again. I want her gone. Today. Legally, she has nothing, so I'm not worried. Lauren nodded. Later that day, Jack confronted Nick at the office. Nick tried to stay calm, but his tension was obvious. Are you really going to go through with this? Nick asked, cornered. You earned this, Jack replied coldly. I'm giving you a week to sell your shares. If you don't agree, prepare for the worst. Nick said nothing and walked out. Emily, meanwhile, spent the day trying to reach Jack, but he ignored her calls. That evening, when he returned home, he found her sitting on the couch with a suitcase at her feet. I understand you want me to leave, she said, looking him in the eye. But I still love you. Jack laughed, but there was no joy in it. Love? You don't know what that word means, Emily. If you did, you wouldn't have destroyed everything we had. She stood up and approached him, but he stepped back. Leave, Emily. We're done. Emily left. When the door closed behind her, Jack felt an unexpected sense of relief mixed with bitterness. He knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was still ahead, with Nick. A few days later, a meeting was held with the company's shareholders. Both Nick and Jack were to present their plans for the business future. Jack was thoroughly prepared. He knew Nick was banking on his silence and hoping to save his reputation. The room was filled with key investors, department heads, and senior staff. Nick took the podium first, radiating false confidence. We've faced tough times, but I'm confident our team is ready for the next phase. My partnership with Jack has always been strong, and partnership? Jack interrupted, standing from his seat. His voice was calm but carried a sharp edge. Are you sure that word still applies? Nick froze, caught off guard. The rest of the room started murmuring. Since we're talking about partnerships, Jack continued, walking toward the podium, perhaps everyone here would be interested in hearing how you define it. He pulled a stack of documents from his briefcase and placed them on the table before the audience. These are detailed reports of how Nick used corporate funds for personal expenses. Hotels, restaurants, and more. The room fell silent. Nick turned pale. This is slander. He blurted. Jack smirked and turned on the projector. Photos and videos, compiled by Joe, appeared on the screen. Slander. Then how do you explain this? The screen froze on a photo, Nick and Emily kissing in a hotel lobby. Someone in the audience let out a sharp gasp. Nick, Jack said, his tone growing icier, you didn't just betray me as a friend. You jeopardized our company. How do you think our clients and partners will react when I release this to the press? Nick looked around helplessly, realizing he'd been defeated. I can explain, he began, but Jack cut him off, don't bother. You have two choices. 1. You voluntarily sell your shares in the company at the price I offer. 2. I file a lawsuit for embezzlement and tarnish your reputation so badly you'll never work anywhere again. Nick knew there was no room for negotiation. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. I'll sell. A week later, Nick signed the papers, transferring his shares to Jack. It was a moment of triumph, but Jack felt no joy. Everything he'd built with Nick now seemed hollow. Emily tried reaching out to Jack several times, leaving voice messages. Jack, I was wrong. I ruined everything, but please, give me a chance to fix it. He deleted them without listening. Instead, Jack focused on starting a new life. Selling the company to a major investor provided him with a substantial payout. With the money, Jack decided to leave Chicago behind. What do I need now? Peace. And time to figure out who I am without them. He bought a house in Montana City, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. A spacious property, quiet surroundings, and mountain views, everything he needed to heal. Sitting on the porch of his new home one evening, he reflected, was I ever truly happy with Emily, or was it all an illusion? Did Nick betray me because I made business more important than friendship? Or were their actions just their own weaknesses, unrelated to me? The questions remained unanswered, but one thing Jack knew for sure, he had emerged from this ordeal stronger. A year later, Jack returned to Chicago to sign the last legal documents related to the company. He ran into Emily by chance at a cafe. You look good, she said, smiling awkwardly. Thanks, he replied calmly. I heard you sold the company. Yeah. Decided it was time for a change. Emily nodded, lowering her gaze. I'll always regret destroying what we had. Jack smiled faintly. You didn't destroy me. You made me stronger. Leaving a tip on the table, he walked away without looking back.